Hey guys, it's Stacy. Today I wanted to make a video about my favorite historical fiction books. Historical fiction is my favorite genre to read. I love history in general. It's my favorite thing to teach. I homeschool my kids and that's my absolute favorite subject to do whenever we're working on it. I love all history, all time periods. I used to think I did not like modern history, but I actually have fallen in love with it since teaching my kids all about it. So these books that I've picked kind of go all over the place with time periods. It's not one specific time period because I like all different kinds of history. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I have 7 that I wrote down. My number 1 is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. This book has a little bit of fantasy in it because it deals with time travel as well as history, but it's mainly about a woman named Claire who's married, and her husband are on kind of like a second honeymoon in Scotland, and while she's there she comes across some of those stones they have, like Stonehenge, and she gets sucked back into time into the 1740s, I believe. So I think there's 7 or 8 books out now. They're huge books. They took me like 2 years to get through, and I just read them back to back. But they're so well written, and the dialogue in these books is phenomenal. I was dreaming in a Scottish accent because I read these books, all day long, every day for so long that I started to think my thoughts with a Scottish accent. That's how well they're done. If you love history, then you have got to read this book because it's so well written, or the whole series is so well written. Well written. I can talk, really. My next favorite is a book called Transcendence by Shay. What is wrong with me? Transcendence by Shay Savage. This one is so different from anything I've ever read before. This one, again, deals with time travel. A young girl gets sent back into time to caveman time period, Neolithic time period, is that what it's called? Where she gets caught. She ends up in a pit and she gets caught by a caveman. And so the book covers several years of their lives as she's, living in caveman time, and all that she has to go through and deal with. And the book is written in such a way as where you would actually think that the author must have lived during that time, because how else would she be able to write it the way she does? It's so good. It's a love story. It is a bit erotic. There are some sex scenes in there, but it's very realistic too. It's written in a way to where it's believable. It's not silly at all. So I totally recommend that one. It's really good. My next one is called The Lost Wife by Alison Reichman. I think that's how you say her name. This one is a World War II book, mainly set in Prague. It's about 2 characters. They are in love, they get married, and Hitler is coming to Prague, and their family is trying to get out of Prague and get to America. And the husband makes it out, and he makes it to America, and the wife gets stuck, and she ends up in a concentration camp. And I thought I knew a lot about Hitler and the Nazis and concentration camps. I thought I was well versed on it and had read a lot on it, but until I read this book, I didn't get it. It was so much more horrific than I even knew of. This book wrote about the daily lives of this girl and the people that she knew in the concentration camp, and it was one of the saddest things I've ever read, but totally worth reading. It showed a lot about how bad things can happen in small doses to where you don't realize it's happening, kind of like the frog in the hot water, in the boiling water. He doesn't realize he's boiling. So it's kind of scary in that way, but it's amazing. It's amazing. You have to read it. My next one is it's a trilogy of books, and the first one is called Surrender by Pamela Clare, and it's about the McKinnon's Rangers. These were real people, real rangers during the French and Indian War. I think this was in, I don't know, early 1800s in America. I'm guessing. No, probably before that. Maybe the 1700s. I don't remember. It doesn't really matter. But this was a group of Scottish Highlanders who had been exiled from Scotland, and they're in America now, in New York. And they get caught doing something wrong, and so they have to fight for the British and fight for King George to kind of pay off their debt or to get out of going to prison. So they become kind of missionary-like, and this again is a romance story. All three stories are about these three different brothers, and each story can stand on its own, really. And so each brother and their love story, but it goes into so much detail about that time period and about the war and what life was like for these Rangers. And I went and looked it up. I did a bunch of research on the McKinnon Rangers after I read the books, and it really follows the correct timeline and is written, you know, like the girl did her research. Pamela Clare did her research when she was writing these books, and they're outstanding. My next one is Atonement by Ian McEwan. Atonement is set in World War II also, but it's a totally different kind of story than The Lost Wife. This one is set in England for the most part, and there is kind of a rich girl, and she's in love with one of the house helper's sons, and they have this kind of secret romance thing going on, and her younger brother, I believe, catches them doing something, and people get accused of things, and the boy, or the young man, ends up going to prison, and the way for him to get out of prison is for him to join the war. And so he ends up joining the war, and part of the book follows his timeline in the war, and part of it follows the young girl's timeline of how she moved on, you know, how she had to go on with him being in prison and then being in the war. And what happened in the end. And I can't go into too many details because there is a huge twist in this book and a huge surprise ending that completely blew me away and shocked me, and I was sobbing, and it's one of the most unique endings to a story I think I've ever read, so love that one. The next one is The White Queen by Philippa Gregory. That's how you say her name. This one is about Elizabeth Woodville and King Edward IV of England. And Elizabeth was a young girl who was not royal at all, and the king is on his horse riding through her lands one day, and he comes across her and falls in love with her, and he marries her and makes her Queen of England, which of course upsets a lot of people because she's not royal. And during this time, it's the time of the War of the Roses, so there's lots of battles going on, lots of backstabbing. There's witchcraft involved because Elizabeth and her mother are kind of believed to be witches or to practice witchcraft. So it's a wild ride. It's very exciting. There's lots going on. So yeah, I recommend that one. And the last one I recommend is kind of a fantasy mix as well. It's Interview with a Vampire. Even if you don't love vampires, if they're not your favorite thing, you still should read this book because the way Anne Rice writes history is stunning. You think you're there. She puts you in 18th century Louisiana, and you can smell the flowers, and you're just there. You're there. I don't know what else to say about her. She writes in such a way to where you are transported to that time and place, and you learn, and it's fascinating, and her characters are crazy and lovable, and you hate them, and it's awesome. I didn't finish the whole series. I know there's a lot of books to the series. I didn't read all of them, but you know, you should at least read Interview with a Vampire. It's totally worth the read. So that was my 7 favorite historical fiction books. I have a lot more, but that would have taken me all day to go through, so I went with these 7. I hope you liked it, and let me know in the comments below what your favorites are too. Thanks. Bye.